listening to the Mind Manual Podcast, episode 48, Manning Up to Our Mind with Shane McManaway. If you want a particular result in your life, but you're unable to get it, tune in to start training your brain and expanding your emotional intelligence to unlock the most powerful and underutilized performance tool that we have. It's the most important work you could do because it affects every area of your life. Hello, and welcome to the first of a series of conversations we're going to roll out as an initiative to help destigmatize the beliefs, practices, and narratives that we have around the health of our mind. I think men have a particularly hard time overcoming the stereotypes that have them denying their own human vulnerabilities, leaving them to suffer in silence. So we're going to take the same strong, manly cultural stance that we've created as a society, where seeking help is viewed as a weakness, along with the fear, shame, and judgment that is perceived if they express their struggles and expose the side of them that perhaps isn't coping so well, and use it to break down the very stigma this way of thinking about it has created. So it's time to man up to our mind and face it head on. When we hide behind the stigma of shame or perceived weakness and become overwhelmed by our emotions, we become blindsided as our amygdala hijacks the higher reasoning part of our brain and it goes offline. And as we firmly take the option of seeking refuge in therapy off the table, then we think we are alone to battle it out, which is never the case. There is always a way out of any painful situation or circumstance, which can also provide an opportunity to truly transform our life that doesn't involve suicide. The contemplation or attempt of suicide is the result of not being able to see it any other way because we shut it all down and the overwhelm becomes too great. What this means is that we need to start opening the door on some therapeutic conversations so that others can see how normal it is to be sharing with others in all the ways that we can sometimes use our mind against ourselves, which can always be turned around. Mental strength and fitness is an expression I heard and have come to love. All men, I'm guessing, ideally want to be strong and fit. For me, this conjures up images of performance, capacity, and mastery. So if we were to replace the term mental health with mental strength and fitness, we start to get a very different picture about what this might encompass. If you think about it in physical terms, it means going to the gym regularly, lifting heavy weights, and doing hard things. It requires us to get out of our physical comfort zone and put our bodies through a grueling workout, alongside of getting out of breath and experiencing muscle soreness and fatigue. The same concept applies to our minds. We don't get stronger by doing easy things. We need to be putting our minds through a similar workout. Now, that might mean we'll need to move outside of our comfort zone in having difficult conversations and bringing up difficult and uncomfortable emotions. But the more we work out and do that, the easier it becomes. And before you know it, you're at optimal well-being. But this requires maintenance. If we stop going to the gym, we'll start to lose our physical fitness in just 2 weeks. It's that noticeable. Learning how to manage our mind and master our emotions is an ongoing work in progress. There are many times we are going to fall off the path or get caught up in thinking we are our thoughts, or there's no way to navigate around something, and all the shame that then builds up because we can't figure it out. So I'm very pleased to introduce you today to Shane McManaway, who's going to lead the charge in opening the door on those conversations that men might typically hide from for fear of being perceived as weak. Shane is used to leading. In his former role as CEO for Allflex Livestock Intelligence in Asia Pacific and China for over the past 17 years. In 2002, Shane was appointed a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for his agricultural and community services. He founded the Xander McDonald Award in 2014, and together with his wife Lynette, they are owners of various agricultural interests and founders of an integrated medical facility in their own hometown. Business-wise, Shane believes the key to success lies in forming strong relationships and encouraging others to exceed expectations. He's never short of innovative ideas and is well known for his outside-the-box thinking. Today, his advice, expertise, and common sense approach to business are highly sought after around the world. In this episode, Shane joins me as a champion for the movement to remove the stigma around mental health by doing the real work of it, which starts with having real conversations about the mental ramblings of our mind and opening the door to an episode in his life where he very nearly ended it all. I hope it inspires you to see how none of us are immune to this. And when the time comes for you to meet your mind, the manly thing to do, so to speak, is to seek that help that will have you transforming it to a life well lived. Stay tuned afterwards for a wrap up of some critical points Shane mentions that I would like to direct your attention to. So enjoy. Thanks for joining with me, Shane. So what has been a significant, disturbing or intense emotional event that you'd like to share that we could unpack for a bit and explore a bit further in how it unfolded or showed up in your life?
Well, firstly, thanks, Lindy, for having me on your podcast. The most significant part of my life where I guess my foundations were absolutely shaken to the core was in 1995 when my then 25-year-old sister, who was newly married, got cancer and was diagnosed with cancer, and unfortunately it was incurable. For the following 2 years, she was incredibly unwell with these two little babies at foot. She was my only sister. I've got three other brothers. We were a very close network family, and I did everything I could to try and look for a solution to something that's blooming hard to find a solution to. I was able to take her from the Wairarapa here in New Zealand over to Melbourne to some specialists, and we stayed over there for a month and they operated, and we did everything we possibly could. But however, her passing was an incredibly sad time for our family, but also for myself. And I was just sort of dealing with that when I was about to turn 40, and the same year that my sister died, my mother coming to my 40th birthday, or coming out to get the air tickets to come to my 40th birthday from our country home, hit the goods train and was killed. My mother was an incredibly lovely person. We didn't have a lot in our family, but one thing that we did have buckets loads of was love. And my mother was the most special person. And I had a really close bond with my mother. My mother, when she was carrying me, contracted polio. And at about 4 months into her pregnancy, the doctors suggested that probably the best thing they could do would be to terminate the pregnancy and allow Mum to focus on recovering from polio.
Wow.
Mum wasn't having a bar of that, and thank goodness she didn't. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here chatting to you today. But I guess that really close association that we had was a really strong mother-son relationship. And right up until the day that she passed, I rang her every day from wherever I was in the world to see how she was. It was incredible. So that was an amazingly stressful period of time. It was also at a time, Lindy, when I was probably climbing to a pinnacle in my career where I was heading up some big companies. I was traveling the world. I had lots going on. I was trying to juggle a lot of business things, probably burning the candle at both ends. And a little while after that, a month or two after that situation, it just hit me like I'd been hit by, just excuse the analogy, but it looked like I'd been hit by the train. It really knocked the stuffing out of me. So I went from this guy who had the ball at his feet and going really, really well, to falling into this very dark hole. And it was a really difficult time. When it hit me, it didn't sort of come on over a period of weeks. It basically just was, 1 minute I was okay, and the next minute I was feeling pretty ordinary about everything. So I made my way sort of down the hole of depression, feeling really, really bad. And I didn't confide in anybody. I just sort of tried to make out that I could get over it and I'd deal with it. For a start, I wasn't quite sure just what was going on. But when I started to get these thoughts of, terrible thoughts of sort of bringing thing to an end, I thought this is probably pretty ordinary. But when you're in that situation, boy, it's hard to rationalise what's right. And I lost myself in that journey where I'd gone from being an upfront sort of a leader and taking people on journeys and building teams and growing businesses to being incredibly sort of nervous and scared about where I'd landed. And a particular day, I was here on my farm here in the Wairarapa in New Zealand, and I was just walking down the back and I thought, this is it, I'm done. And I was going off to put myself out of my misery, I guess, at that point, and I went round the corner from our hay shed, and there was a cattle beast had a young calf that had put its head through one of our deer fences and got its head hooked in and couldn't get it out. So I thought, well, I can't leave you. So I went and got him out of the fence, and by the time I'd done that, it was a passing moment, and I thought, I've just saved you, I can save myself. I just need to stop this. This is ridiculous. So I turned around and followed my tracks back to the house, and I started to rebuild myself, and I started to work on why I was feeling like I was, which was pretty obvious given what I've told you about the trauma that we'd been through as a family. And I started to really just focus and started to confide in a few friends, really close friends, that I was feeling pretty ordinary. And when I did do that, they said to me, well, one, we're not surprised. You've been through an incredibly big ordeal, sad ordeal with you and your family. But equally as importantly, we've noticed that in you as a person. We've noticed that, but we didn't sort of stop to think to reach out. So that was a really telling moment. I had people around me who were close and could see the signs, but didn't put their hand up or didn't ask the question. So there was a learning for me. If I ever see anybody like that now, I absolutely say, how are you getting on? How are you travelling? You don't seem your normal self. So I guess I took a real big learning out of that. But as I came back out of that, I learned a lot about myself, Lindy. I learned that you've got to move on, and you've got to start to fill your mind back up with positive thoughts. You've got to replenish your emotional bank account and get it back into credit. I was in huge deficit, and in fact, if I was a business, I would have been bankrupt probably. But I brought myself out of it, and it took a while. It took a few days. There was a few days where dark clouds on a clear day would be overhead, but they got less and less. And when I came out the other side, it was a terrible way to learn about this terrible disease called depression. But it taught me a lot, and it also taught me a lot about how I might have been able to help other people who were in that position. So about a year after, and I was feeling a lot better about myself, I started to go on a crusade here, mainly in New Zealand, about making sure that we started to talk about it as a topic, especially in the rural sector. I've got a reasonably high profile here in New Zealand. I'm on a national radio program every few weeks, and it gave me an opportunity and a platform to start to say that it's okay not to be okay. Hand up and look, there's a lot of organisations out there now who are really focused on doing this, which is marvellous. But you can have a lot of organisations doing a lot of good things, but unless somebody identifies the problem in you, or you identify it in yourself, and you don't feel comfortable, you don't really go as well as you probably could in looking for some assistance and some help. So I guess that's a long-winded way of sort of telling you my story, Lindy. And so that would be the biggest thing that sort of jolted my foundations, as I say.
Yeah. So just going back to when you started to go down that hole and you didn't quite recognise it as such, what were the mental processes going on? Like, what was, how did you become preoccupied with what had happened, and how were you processing it? How were you thinking about it? I mean, you've had this devastating loss, and often when we are hit with such trauma and tragic events, as we all will be, it really puts our existentialism into question. Were you thinking, there was no point to this, we've got such a short life anyway, I may as well join them? How were you sort of thinking about it?
No, I never sort of felt like I should be joining them and shortening my life up. I guess the thing that was most noticeable, I lost my confidence. I started to question my ability, and I started to not want to have people around me. You've known me for a long time, and you know that I'm a people person. That's one of my things that I probably use as one of my strengths. Is I love people and I enjoy connecting and being around people. But I started to feel like I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to see people. If somebody came up the drive to our farm, I would be probably looking to sort of hide rather than get out there and put the billy on and have a yarn like I normally would. How was I processing it? I was processing it by just closing down, I guess, and trying to not put myself at risk. So the less I did and the more people I saw, the less likely I would have been exposing my weakness of the situation.
Yeah, and that's what I was about to say. When you said hide, usually when we go to hide, we're feeling shame. The emotion of shame will have us hiding away. So what were you thinking? Where might the shame have been coming from in this situation where you were in? Is it that you weren't coping or being perceived, do you think that's where the link was there?
Yeah, I think I wasn't being, I set myself very high standards.
Yeah.
I absolutely am my own greatest taskmaster. Don't like having a go at something unless I'm going to go reasonably good at it.
Yeah.
And sort of sensed at that point that possibly I wasn't that person, and I'd lost that sort of mojo and I'd lost that ability. And, that came with a whole host of other sort of behavioural things. I probably, I didn't turn to any excessive drinking or drugs, so I didn't do that. I didn't go down that path. I just sort of hibernated really and didn't get involved socially, didn't want to go out. But it was something going on in my head that was sort of bigger than me, and I'd lost sort of control of the thinking a wee bit.
Yeah, right. And with that, I mean, you mentioned the word control there. So having lost your sister, having lost your mother, this real sense of, wow, maybe I don't control as much as I thought I did in my life. Do you think that element of control, and when you said, I don't like to give things a go unless I know I'm going to give it, do really well or give it a great crack, or is there that whole sense of you're not controlling the outcome or the result? Is that an element, do you think, that got away from you there at that time? Really questioning, how much do I control here? Did you feel your foundation sort of shift beneath you with the realization of such tragic loss around you that maybe, hang on, I don't control so much in my life that I thought I did?
No, I didn't feel like I'd lost control.
Yeah.
I just felt like I'd lost a big part of my life, like I'd lost a part of me had gone, and I didn't know how to replenish that because, as I say, I had such a close relationship. We're a family that were incredibly loved. We didn't have much at the beginning. My dad had a little farm that was almost only just viable, and he brought up a family, and we lived a very modest lifestyle, I can tell you. We had nothing. We would be at times the bank would turn up to talk about possibly taking the farm off Dad because it wasn't viable, hard working, but it wasn't big enough to get there. So, but all through those hardships of farming and those tough times as a family, nothing ever left our bond of being loved by our parents. So I guess I just lost a part of that.
Yeah.
When I went down this pathway, Lindy, I didn't know how I was going to ever fill that, and for a while I didn't think I could.
Okay. So that's that real sense of loss and grief there, which is all very normal and natural. But you mentioned also you lost your self-confidence. What do you think that was about? What was it, the confidence in your ability? Was it the confidence that you could be, the top man in all situations? Like, how do you think where you lost that? What was happening there?
That's an interesting question, and one that I guess I'll just answer how I felt at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be the top man. I didn't feel like I was losing that. That didn't concern me. I just felt like I was unwell and I didn't quite know how to go about fixing myself.
Right.
I was sort of probably just slowing down and grinding to a sort of a halt. I was paralysed by probably negative thoughts.
Yep.
And those negative thoughts.
What type of thoughts might they have been along the lines of?
Oh, some of them were angry. Some of them were a bitterness. Some of them were complete sadness. I'd find myself, as a grown man at 40, nearly 41 years of age at this stage, I'd find myself just stopping and crying.
Yeah.
Which was the best thing I could have done.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now looking back, it's It's not, you don't have to be tough.
No. And when we feel that emotion, it needs to be expressed. And if we don't express it and we just hold on to it, it then goes and directs our lives in strange ways.
It does. And look, so I just sort of went into this sort of, I was paralyzed, I guess, just by the sort of negative thoughts. Some, as I say, some were dark, some of them were angry, some of them were just, what's the future hold? Where do you go from here when you're in this position? But I don't know how you could short circuit that.
No, I mean, that's a natural, normal process of the grieving and the loss and the, but it can spiral out of control because we keep asking ourselves these questions and we never actually go to answer them. So did you ever sit yourself down and when you have the thought, what's the point or what does the future hold? Did you ever really sit down and sort of answer that question? What do I want my future to be? What is going to be next for me? What's now the trajectory of my life?
Yeah, Lindy, I did. And I think once I accepted where I was at and what was going on, and I turned myself around and walked back and got myself on the right bus again, the bus of positivity, rather than I caught the bus of negativity. And so I changed buses. And as soon as I did that, I started to backfill that empty space with some positive thinking and started to fill that with some dreams that I would have. And I'm a bit, a lot of people probably say I'm a dreamer, but I prefer to say I was a visionary.
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
And I'm really, really pleased that I am. And, I started to think, I left the station and started to think about where I was heading and what I could do with what I'd learnt. How could I help more people? How could I was in a position where I was able to help, reach out. Once I did that, I really started to refill, as I say, that emotional bank account with some really neat things. And I got back into the gym, did a lot of exercise. I started to feel good about myself. I just, generally life just started to improve.
And when you say you stepped on that bus of positivity, we've heard the word toxic positivity bandied around. And I think what that refers to is you just try and believe all these great things that you don't actually quite believe yet. And so when you're talking yourself up on something and you don't quite believe it yet, it's like you're telling yourself this lie, and which is toxic positivity because we're incongruent with it. But so what were some of the things, the positivity, because many people, when they hear that term, they just think it's all this, I guess, toxic positivity that we don't really believe in. But what were the things that really took hold for you in turning that around?
I guess I wanted to get back to where I was my time prior to being succumbed by this depression and get back to that point. And so I guess the things that were in my mind was to get to there and start to attract good people, get some people back around me. And the people that I'd sort of pushed away could see why. And once I started to come back around, they were incredibly understanding, and it was only a very small handful of people that would have ever known I was in this place. I'm still running a big business at this stage. I'm still at that point, I think, running a business with nearly over 2,000 staff, and so
highly functioning
job. I had to brave my way through that. But what did I put back in there? I guess I just continued to keep thinking that I had an opportunity with what I'd learned in that process to go and help others.
Wow. And so you really noticed that shift of the inward focus, what am I going to do? Like, is this worth living for me? I guess when we have that inward focus and we're desperately not liking the way we feel, and then we turn that around and project that out to sort of, well, what could I do to help others and make ourselves less of a focus? Do you think that was fundamental in this turnaround for you?
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Totally fundamental. Yep. Without question. Yep.
So creating a sense of purpose and meaning out of something so tragic?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And to this day, I mean, we're 27 odd years down the track now, so it's a long time since that tragedy, or both of those things happened. But even just every day of my life, I'm looking to see what I can do, or my wife Lynette and I can do to help others. That comes with its own interesting challenges as well, Lindy.
Yeah, right. What sort of challenges have you noticed with that then? I guess walking through the pitfalls of, what can help turn our lives around, and then what might be the next stitch, because I guess no matter what we do, we are going to come across the tough times, the good times in any endeavour. And it's balancing that, accepting that there's going to be this 50-50 of life where you have 50% of positive emotions and 50% of negative emotions. We have access to this full spectrum that this human condition, I guess, exposes us to. And so just because we sort of turn things around in one area, it's not like it's just going to be roses and daisies from there on. It's sort of like it is a day-to-day process, no matter what journey we take. So when you turned things around in that way for you, what were some of the pitfalls that came across with that?
Well, I guess the pitfalls, when I turned them around, I guess there wasn't too many pitfalls because I'd reckon I'd fallen into most of them. So anything from there was sort of filling those pitfalls or those potholes that I'd fallen into back up so that they weren't on the run on the track for the next time round. But in that process of doing that, I learned how to, that you might have just heard the train go past and toot his horn in the background, and that's the train that goes through at this very hour of the day, 27 years ago, that hit my mother.
Wow.
So look how close to our farm our train is. So I guess that's just a testament to we live with it every day. So that was a bit of a coincidence. It just went past while we're chatting. And I learned a lot of skills. So now, like, I would be absolutely wrong of me to say that I haven't had bad days since then. I can tell you. I mean, as you say, everybody has highs and lows. I don't think I'd never say never, but I would desperately try and never go back to where I was because I've learnt. I know now when I'm in those positions, and I've not been in them for a long, long time. I've just sort of, because I've changed my sort of style of the way I think about things in life. That might be a bit of an age thing or a maturity thing, or I'm not quite sure.
And experience, I guess. You said you've learnt a lot of tools and you've changed the way you think about things. What might be some of those tools or the way that you can reframe things that make things better?
Well, I think try and simplify the problem and try and break it down into some very simple bite-sized pieces, because you get into these, you second guess things when you second guess yourself. You think people don't like you. You wonder why they haven't called you back. All of those little silly things, which is basically just saying you're becoming incredibly insecure. So in my mind anyway. And so I just think that you just have to sometimes let some things go and you just focus on, there's an old saying, don't count the ants while the elephants are running by. When you're out there and it's all going badly, sometimes you get a bit focused on the damn ants. And there's a lot of them, they keep coming, whereas there's not so many elephants and they're a bit bigger things. And once you're tackled, you've achieved quite a bit.
I love that analogy.
I think just breaking it down into things that are really meaningful and what really counts for me and for our family and for Lynette and I, that's my first and foremost requirement. What's good for us? I'm no good to them if I'm not running too good. So I guess that's how I handled it. What tools to use? I just think I just use the tools of trying to remain being super positive about things, but not being over positive and silly, not sort of saying everything's always good, because everything's not always good. We know that.
When you say focus on the good things, and that's the thing, where we place our attention, that increases. And if we are looking for the bad things, we will find them in any scenario or situation. But as we focus on them, they tend to expand and it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy where, the thing that we put out and look for is the thing that we find. And so it repeats and continues to. So in looking for the positives, what are some of the positives is that has meaning to you? How do you identify a positive? Like, what is there a value behind it? Is there a meaning you assign to something? I'm just interested in the process of, so it's quite esoteric, isn't it, when we talk about positive and negative? So are those things that are positive to you, are they of significant value, or have you assigned a special meaning to them? So if you were to look at a situation or something, how does your mind process what a positive thing might be that you might then go and choose to focus your attention on?
Yeah, I guess a positive thing for me is to make sure that my train of thought is taking me on a journey that's better than where I am at the minute.
Right.
One that is not only fulfilling for me, but the people around me.
Yeah.
Because my glass half full is normally filled up by other people being happy and positive around me. So I don't.
Yeah.
I get a lot of energy and excitement in my life by those that are around me who are equally as positive and friendly and happy and doing great things. And also, I guess me playing some part, be it reasonably small, in some cases might be a bit larger than the norm, to try and help people to become better people themselves. So that's a method of my sort of replenishment program.
Yeah, that's how you fill your cup up.
That's how I fill my cup up. And I do quite a lot of mentoring for young people, especially in the agri sector. In fact, namely in the agri sector. That's my life, that's my domain, that's my wheelhouse, as they say, I guess. And so I have at the moment 4 people sort of between 25 and 30 odd that I'm mentoring, and that's more around, not so much around their business mentoring, but about how they approach things, how they go about managing their minds through some of these things that they're doing in their businesses, because they are young people who are incredibly talented, going at pace, running quickly, and sometimes can just do what I said before, get a little caught up in the detail. And so I'm a very basic, for me to be reasonable at anything I do, I have to be pretty basic because I'm not an academic. So I just need to try and keep it pretty straight up the middle, play it up the middle and play safely where I can. So that's some of the stuff I pass on, but that gives me, when I see these young people flourishing, and, when as you know, I founded the Xander McDonald Award, and it's taken many, many people now through to do great things, and it inspires me every day when I see them, what they're doing and achieving, knowing that I had just a little part to play in that. And I find that incredibly rewarding, but the same in our local community here, see if we can help.
Yeah. And is that been your experience, with the top achievers, the people at the top of the field that are coming up through the ranks? The biggest thing would be in managing their mind and their approach and the way they think about things. Like, what's the biggest impact that you can have as a mentor, I guess, in that way?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing I can do is make sure that their thinking process is such that they stay focused on what's important to them in their roles, what's important to them in their lives. I'm a bit of a cynic, I guess, when it comes to the work-life balance thing. We went through this sort of a work-life balance situation, and I probably throw myself here out for a bit of questioning on this, but if you bloody want to go good and you want to work hard, unfortunately, sometimes the balance needs to be a bit more about work than it is around about play, until you can get yourself in a position. And I think that served me well, and I think it serves most people well. I'm not saying you want to work yourself into the ground. You do need to take time to refresh and replenish your body and your thinking. But I've worked with quite a few people whose focus is on this, and
Guess the trick then is, and you're right, there's only so many hours in the day. And if you're just going to do a strict 9 to 5 type sort of attempt, sometimes that's not enough to get things over the line. But really what we can control then is how we think about it, how we think about our work and our presence and how we approach, what's the attitude that we approach that, which can make all the difference. Because, I guess where you're leading to here is the whole issue of burnout. But burnout is very rarely associated with the physical exertion of things. It's more in the spinning and how we're processing everything that's so exhausting. It's this mental exhaustion that then converts over into an emotional exhaustion. And that is more depleting than any physical activity I've come across. And so there's the real, I guess, opportunity in that, in how we approach our work when we're there and how we're thinking about it. Because the doing of it, there is that sense, and often we get stuck on that treadmill. That's the treadmill of doing, of just keeping those wheels turning. But in the midst of that busyness and even chaos, we can bring a sense of being, which is the opposite of doing. And we can experience that in any moment, no matter what we're doing. It's that sense of bringing, I guess, a bit of mindfulness and just resting in a bit of a third-party observer state, even noticing what we're doing while we're being and observing this other dimension of ourselves. I don't know, and we'll lead into that in a minute. My next question was, do you think there's anything more to the blood and bones of our bodysuit? Is this spiritual element to our being? And I like to think in that situation that we have the seat of our soul, let's say, that sits in silence as a curious observer of our life. And we can sort of connect more a bit, I think, with that spiritual part and look on and just observe and notice what we're doing, what we're busy about. Because we have this metacognition, this ability where we can think about what we're thinking. We can observe and see this sort of almost third-party observer actually notice the thoughts we're thinking and just observe, oh, isn't that interesting what I'm thinking there? And so there's that I think, the potential to bring that more spiritual part of our being into play, into our work, into wherever we are, that offsets all the doing, where we can sit with our being and just harmonize that activity. I think we would eliminate a lot of burnout. Yeah.
I agree totally. But it's interesting. I don't know many people that probably think like that. In fact, I don't know that I've asked anybody if they think like that. So I'm generalizing, and people may, but I know I don't. I don't sort of stop and analyze what I'm thinking. I think once I've thought it and it's out there, that's been I've sort of processed and it's there. Not to say that I don't think about what I'm going to say or what I'm thinking before I say it, but I don't sort of stop now and just think, what am I thinking and what's that doing in my life at the moment?
Right. Where it's really useful is that most people think they are their thoughts, that if they think something, therefore it's real. But it's not. It's just a thought we're having. It's an electrical impulse activity that's happening in the brain. And we think it's real. We think it's fact. Whereas most thoughts that we think are not fact at all. They're just optional thoughts our brain is producing, is offering us. And we get caught up in thinking they're real as if they're concrete and this is what's truth. And sometimes it really helps to separate ourselves out from our thoughts, even just to notice, I'm thinking that thought. Isn't that interesting? And so we just get that little bit of separation from our thoughts, because our mind is very chaotic. We have up to 60,000 thoughts a day. That's a pretty chaotic framework to operate in. And if we can just get some separation from that and a little bit more mindful awareness of this activity that goes on in our mind and our brain, and separate ourselves from that, we are not our thoughts. And then we get this whole level of awareness where we can think deliberate thoughts with intention, thoughts that then serve us, that take us on a different journey, because our thoughts inevitably release a chemical reaction that creates our emotions. And so our thoughts create our feelings. Our feelings are what's fueling our action. When that action is being fueled by a lot of negative thoughts on the other side of the spectrum, that is exhausting. That is what leads to burnout. It's not in the doing, it's in the energy that fuels that action. So if you tapped into some great positive energy that fills you up, that makes you come alive, that action then being fueled by that energy is going to feel great. You're going to feel elated. You feel like can do that all day long. It's actually not a time thing. And so that sort of, I guess, because we don't have this separation of our thoughts, we don't recognize what the process is that creates our feelings, that drives our actions. And it's our actions and behavior that's actually producing the results in our life. And all of that originated in thought. So thought is so powerful, and we've got to have that awareness over it and start using it more intentionally, more deliberately, and start creating our life the way we want it. And we have to, line it all up with the results that we want. So when we can recognize and backtrack a bit and realize that that action or that behavior resulted from this way of feeling, and this way of feeling was induced by or created by that thought, it's sort of like that system's not working. I've got to change the thought. It's not producing the result I want. And so then we can start getting very deliberate about, well, which thought's actually going to induce the feeling that I want to have. When you're at work doing all these things, what feeling do you want to have? And we can start creating all of that very deliberately.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, if we don't get that separation, then we're just being driven and our lives are being run on these chaotic thoughts, 60,000 of them a day. And it's sort of, how do you make sense of that? How do I organize that? How do I get control over that?
Lindy, I was working in the cattle yards the other day with some bulls, and I think I had more than 65,000 thoughts in one day. I think I might have exceeded the national average there. That's all part of the fun. And I guess you're talking about these thoughts sort of lead to your behaviour, and I totally get that. I understand that. But I guess my thoughts, I probably am close to my visionary thinking, and my thoughts are probably similar things, because that's my behaviour is normally based on what I'm sort of visualising and have out front. So I sort of set my parameters and my cursor at a level where I want to run at to make sure that I could achieve the vision that I've sort of set ourselves, or myself or ourselves. But you're so right. It's negative thought or thoughts that are not going to take you into the right space are incredibly. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more.
Yeah, yeah. And so just going down to that question, is there some sense of spiritual essence that you connect with on some level? I know you mentioned that you love to connect with other people. What do you think that connection's about? Is it a feeling that comes, this sense of feeling belonging? What's that about? Because that's what fills your cup as well. It's a really integral component, because I do believe that we are social beings. We are wired for connection. How would you describe, if we were to sort of break that down a bit?
I certainly don't disbelieve that there's a bigger field out there keeping an eye on it, but I'm not a highly religious person, and I don't live in the world of thinking you don't have to be a full-on Christian to have a life. But I don't take anything away from the people that are, and that whatever works for everybody and how you think is incredibly centered around the person themselves. What connects me with people, and why do I like people, and what does that do from it? It's not spiritual as much as it is. I think that it's a community thing. It's a village. We're living in a village. It's living in a network of people who, as long as you are positive and behave well, they're going to treat you well. And I think, you do somebody a good turn and it comes back to you somewhere, but when you're doing it, you don't expect it to come back. But I genuinely believe that you only get back what you put in anything.
But I just wondered, what's the emotional component of connection for you? How would you describe it in one word? Like, in terms of what emotion is it?
Yeah, it's an emotion of fulfillment.
Right.
Yeah.
You're feeling fulfilled.
Yeah, fulfilled. I would not be fulfilled if I was in not meeting people, or I wasn't around people that were helping me fill my cup. I would not feel good if I was in a room where I'd left the room, if I was sharing a meeting or I was doing something that I didn't take the meeting to a more positive place than when we started. That's not to say that that's not weakness in leadership, or you're just going to say yes to everything. But it's a bit like, I guess, when somebody comes to you with a problem, and you need to sometimes dismantle that problem, but you need to put it back together better than it was when you dismantled it. Otherwise, you've left that person in a poorer shape than when they first come to see you. Now, I'm no psychologist, and I'm sure if I went and sat with one, I'd be there for a year probably trying to sort. They've got a bit of material to work with. But I just sense that I'm not a hermit. I don't go well on my own. I don't like being on my own. My wife Lynette and I, even though we're busy, she's busy doing things around this area, and it wouldn't be a couple of hours go by we're not sort of checking in to see how we're travelling and how we're going, and we're very interested in each other in terms of how we're going. And sometimes she'll be a bit down and with a bit of a challenge, and I'll pick her up, and likewise. And I get so I guess if I'm like that with the community and like that with friends that I have, I'd like to think that I would be known as a person that was looking to try and help people rather than hold them back or put them down.
Yeah. No, that's great stuff. And I guess we've covered the negative emotion, and you may just be repeating yourself here. Another question I had was, what occasions might trip you up when you find yourself stuck in that negative emotion, whether that's spinning on something, you're fearing something in the future, anticipating something in the future, or lamenting and regretting the past. How do you sort of stay centered in the present, in focusing on what's before you rather than spinning too far out in the future or lamenting and regretting too far back in the past? Because, I guess depression has often been associated with this tendency to regret and lament what has happened. Anxiety is often closely associated with spinning out on all of these potential fears and threats that could present in the future. How do you stay in the middle there somewhere? What are some of your tools of trade that you use?
Well, I guess I'm a reasonably organised person, so I try and stay organised. I try and stay uncluttered. I try and stick with what I'm doing in the moment and not try and have a whole lot of. I'm probably not super good at multitasking, and so that's probably a good thing. So I try and stay with what I'm doing. And I find that if I do get a little bit left of centre or right of centre, it's probably because I'm trying to take too much on and do a few things starting to sort of cross over and become a little entangled, and immediately have to sort of stop and say, no, let's just take a pause here. Where's the priority here? Let's get, and then so I'm good. I'm good at that because that's the way that my mind thinks. As I say, I'm not an academic. I'm just a person that's had a bit of a crack in life and sort of tried to stay pretty simple and keep it simple and not complicate things too much on the way through. And I said earlier in the chat, it served me well. It won't be changing. I don't think, Lindy. I think I'll stay with where I'm at.
Sounds good. And what's been the biggest struggle, if any, in the transition that you've made from the corporate high-flying life to the more, private life that you now lead?
I miss terribly the cut and thrust of big business. Like it was great. I worked with the most fabulous people around the globe. I was on aeroplanes flying up to Paris to board meetings, up to London to board meetings, into Poland to open factories, up to Beijing to our office there. I was just constantly all over the place. It was a magnificent sort of 18 or 19 years of really intense, full-on stuff, which was really good. And as I say, the most supportive wife in Lynette, who joined where she could, but kept the home fires burning while I did that. So, it was a period of time that was, without operating as a team, we wouldn't be where we are. But I guess as we operated as a team, we are where we are because we did. And we don't forget that. And I certainly don't forget that. I found it really tough. I found it difficult to sort of not be the boss. I found that quite challenging. I found it quite a period of, I definitely didn't get depressed. I sort of got a little bit, I'd see things happening probably with our company, which I sort of almost sort of lived and breathed and felt, loved it so much that it was like having a piece of my body cut off when I wasn't part of it. So I did find that a little difficult. I think that's normal. I've talked to quite a lot of people who've been in high flying roles or, senior positions and stopped. I mean, I haven't stopped, I guess in terms of that. I've backfilled that with, we've got a few farms and we've got integrated medical facility in our local community that my wife and I built. We've got a number of things going on and our earth moving business in Brisbane. We've got plenty happening. So it's just a different sort of happening. But again, my purpose in life is I think one of the things I have done, Lindy, I think I've probably focused more recently on, not recently, but in the latter years about nutrition. About sort of looking after me a little better. That my wife might disagree with that, as she takes a couple of cold bottles of Heineken out each night to the rubbish tin. But generally, it's something that we're mindful of, and I guess that's all part of the process and trying to keep yourself reasonably healthy, keep a healthy mind, keep a healthy body, and be in an environment that's good and not in a bad environment. Stay clear of the bad environments if you can.
Yeah. Did you notice any sense or change in or loss of identity as you transitioned from this more hectic role where you were the boss to wherever things are now? Yeah, loss. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Although yes and no, because I guess it was through that period that I'm on a number of boards and have been since, and so I'm sort of still living in that world, but it's just in some cases I'm not the boss. In some situations I'm the chair of the board, but generally it's the pressures of it aren't quite the same as running all over the world. I guess one of the things about traveling and doing that was a big part of the stress there was not so much the job, it was the travel, it was the intensity, it was the I'd be here in New Zealand, we had a lot of business in Europe, and I'd get up at 2:00 in the morning and be on conference calls till 6 or 7 in the morning. And one thing that I have noticed also, one of the best medicines that I can take is sleep, and that's not sleeping during the day. But if I can get my head on the pillow by 9:00 at night and not wake up until about 5:30 in the morning, maybe a stop in the middle of the night for some reason as we age, but generally sleep is the best. It is just, especially a sleep which is not with a mind that's relaxed. And I'm very lucky. I can have some really big challenges on my plate, but when I go to bed, I leave them for the next morning to deal with again. I've never been much good at solving problems in the middle of the night sleeping, although the old saying, give it a sleep test, does work. And I've always sort of felt that if stress was good for you, they would have taught us how to do that better at school. And so I've sort of kept those two things out of the road a little bit.
Of that. That's great. Oh, well, thank you so much for opening the door to a conversation that could save a life. What this series is about is destigmatizing and demystifying what it might sound like to unpack these ramblings of our mind and to openly be able to share with one another. I mean, that was the big thing that got you out, was sharing and confiding and hearing others say, yeah, no, things aren't quite right. And all of us at some point in life will go through this. And it's just what I want to show out of this series is that we can all turn it around into a life transforming journey. That has, your difficult times have helped very much, by the sound of it, help directed you outward into help, wanting to help others and making that your, I guess, life purpose that fills your cup up and all of that. So that's available to all of us. It's just about a matter of whether we go to actually address that and turn it around. I mean, for you, it sounded like it turned around on an instant with the decision that you wanted to now do something different, get back to where you were, rather than continue on that trajectory, which very nearly was the case. So thank you very much for sharing all of that. And I hope it helps to turn somebody else around.
Certainly. Lindy, there's one thing I'd just like to finish off with.
Yeah.
And that is a couple of areas. One would be around leaders. And everybody sort of looks to leaders as because you're a leader or you're at the head of something, people don't feel comfortable about approaching them because it's sort of, that might be a bit of a contentious issue if they're not feeling right or not being themselves. You can do no harm. You'll do more harm by doing nothing than reaching out and doing something. So it doesn't matter what position you hold in an organizational structure. There is nobody that's immune from this problem called depression. So I just would really encourage people to have the strength to just take a moment and ask somebody, are they okay? You just don't seem to be acting like you normally do. I'm really concerned about your welfare. I think the world of you, but I'm really concerned. That person has the opportunity to tell you how they feel. But if you don't ask, they're not going to tell you. And the other thing, I guess, is, as I mentioned earlier, the primary production sector, the New Zealand agricultural landscape, the Australian landscape, which I'm well immersed in both countries. We live in isolation and we've got a lot of challenges as farmers, and we've got many things coming at us, and it's not getting easier. And so the pressures seem to be getting greater. And so we need to start to get match fit for these things, and we need to start to think now, how do we deal with this? And it's not about how we deal with the river running through our farm, or somebody telling us we can't cut a tree down, or somebody turning up with a clipboard, the clipboard warriors turning up and telling you can't do something here or there. It's about how do you prepare yourself for those situations. So you've had a bit of training internally as to how you're going to cope with those sort of things, and don't let them get to you, because they're not going to go away. We're living in a world where the world seems to turn twice as fast every day than it used to 50 years ago. As you say, there's so much going on in our lives, and there's so many pressures with the way that we're living, and it's all good. A lot of it's incredibly good. We're living in a world of absolute promise and a lot of opportunity. We've just got to have the eyes to see that opportunity, and you'll see those opportunities through a mind that's clear rather than one that's swamped with fog.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but I've enjoyed the chat, and so thank you so much.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for contributing to the cause.
Oh, absolutely. I'll continue to contribute for as long as I can.
Oh, that's wonderful. Some of the takeaways that I received from Shane is that his very close encounter with suicide culminated in a moment of overwhelm, where he had a moment to pause while he helped the cow get her head unstuck in the fence. And during this pause, he was able to reflect on his response in wanting to help her. This helped him to decide that if he could do it for her, then maybe he could do it for himself. And so he backtracked up to the house again to work out what he needed to do to get his life back on track. The whole idea of the pause is an incredibly powerful one, because we're giving our brain a moment to come back online. Neuroscience has shown us that when the emotional center of the brain is activated, being the amygdala, The higher reasoning function of the brain, being the prefrontal cortex, goes offline. This is because to the primal brain, the fear or intense emotion that is being felt will be prioritized in dealing with the threat immediately. So there isn't time to think about it. We just need to either run, flee, or freeze, ironically, in order to survive. We are deeply wired for survival. So this is the patterning and priority of how our brain will react to whatever stimulus is being offered. The pause, as in the case of Shane, gave him enough time to deactivate this hyper-aroused emotional state and engage his higher logical, reasoning, executive function. And as he began to engage it, he figured out that a big part of the plan to get back on track was physical exercise, which is crucial in helping to rebalance our biology with the release of all the hormones and neurotransmitters that are needed to help us function in an optimal way. He also used the analogy of stepping off the negative bus and onto the positive bus. For Shane, a positive meant ensuring that his train of thought is going to take him on a journey that is better than where he currently is, which is not only fulfilling for him, but also the people around him. So that translated in getting back to the place he was at before the loss and depression and the suicidal thoughts. What that looked like was in attracting good people around him and looking forward to the opportunity in helping others, in transitioning from an inward focus to an external focus on what he could do to help others and creating a sense of purpose and meaning out of something so tragic. And to this day, some 27 years later, Shane continues to closely identify with and engages in the practice of helping and mentoring others with this sense of purpose. He then went on to reflect on the tools he has learned, which primarily comes down to how he has changed the way he thinks about things. Shane likes to simplify the problem and break it down into simple, bite-sized pieces, which involves in having to let go of the small things. And the quote of the session that came out of that was, "Don't count the ants while the elephants are running by." He continued on with the analogy by saying that when you're out there and it's all going badly, sometimes you get a bit too focused on the damn ants, and there's a lot of them. They keep coming. Whereas there's not so many elephants. And so once you've tackled those, the big elephants, you've achieved quite a lot. I loved that. When it comes to values, Shane assesses things through the lens of what's good for him and his wife, Lynette, because if he's no good, then he can't show up his best for what's most important to him. The way he fills his cup is by being around others who are positive and happy. Shane gets a lot of energy and excitement in his life by being around others who are as equally positive and friendly and happy and doing great things. The other value he aligns with is to play a part in helping others to become better people themselves, which all forms part of his replenishment program. And lastly, Shane discovered the significance of reaching out to others who you sense are not going okay and extending that question of concern for them and checking in to see if there is anything you can do, which all helps in thinking that we're not so alone in all of this. This was something that really stood out for him. And so now he takes the opportunity whenever he notices to follow up on this with others. So that's a quick wrap up of our session together. I hope you found some treasure in there somewhere, and at the very least, some sense of permission in exploring some of the unspoken topics that we tend to skirt around and avoid for fear of being judged as less than. So thank you, Shane McManaway, for manning up, which according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary is defined as an effort to deal with something in a way that is considered strong or manly. Opening the door on these types of conversations is not for the faint-hearted and surely does speak to the strength of character and courage to go against the current norms and stereotypes of the day. This was just another example of doing what floats his boat, which is to help others. If you would like to do your part in helping to normalize all of this and open up the conversation, don't forget to share this with the men in your life that you care about. And even better, reach out to me if you would like to contribute to the cause and open the door on a therapeutic chat that we can have together for the benefit of others who may be dealing with something similar. If not now, then very possibly at some time in the future. None of us are getting out of here alive, and we're all in this together. So let's get real about the ramblings of our mind and open the forum for everyone to learn from. Thanks for listening and have a beautiful day.